All right, great. Thanks, Mickey. First, before we get started, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the New York State GIS Association for setting this up, for Al for needling me, and seriously asking me to present. I hope what I present today is of value or gets some ideas flowing, because we did some things a little bit differently from what we've done in the past. So we wanted to share that with you. And Mickey for all of his assistance. So I appreciate the opportunity to share our experiences with you. And then I'll be happy to answer your questions at the end. I see some familiar and friendly icons joining us in the chat area. So before I get started, I just want to give you a little background on myself. So I just want to cover some of the, kind of set the table for things, and then get rolling. I have about 30 years, nearly 30 years of experience in GIS, where I started in the private sector. Worked for about 8 years. I was very fortunate to convince my boss long ago to get an early copy of PC Arc Info at that point. What I didn't enjoy was carrying all the manuals around constantly. For those of you who've gone back that far, you know what I'm talking about. And I've been with Rockland County for a little over 20 years, where I've led the charge on GIS development and very much enjoy it, and I've been very fortunate to be employed here. So I'm going to get started here on what we do. And what I'm going to talk about today is, as Mickey said, mapping our road obstructions during an emergency. And I go back all the way to Hurricane Floyd, and when that hit in the late 90s, and then certainly the last few events recently. And if you also keep in perspective the fact that we're within, Rockland's in the Hudson Valley, we have a nuclear facility not far away, so we do get fortunate that we do and have to get very involved in emergency management, and you'll see that throughout my presentation. A little bit what I'm going to be covering is, first I'm going to give you a little background on Rockland GIS, and then how you or anybody else could access our geospatial data. You'll see how we share it locally and everything. And then what our role is in our Emergency Operations Center and how it kind of evolved over time. I'm going to take it back a little bit because I think there's some pertinent things there. And then we do application development, some of it in-house, and talk about that, and kind of we've outsourced some things as well. I'm going to talk about really the focus of what I want to deal with or discuss is the use of GIS technology during emergencies and what lessons we've learned from that. That's really going to be the crux of what I want to talk about, and then what future steps we've been taking, and then kind of wrap things up. So, just a little background. We've been lead agency in my time here. While we're out of the Department of Planning, we work for, as you'll see, just about every department. One of our primary missions is actually we're responsible for the mandated aspect of tax map maintenance, so we have to work with our local assessors. There's a lot of value to that just by the very fact that I know they're getting maintained and updated, and that's such a key source layer for what we do. We maintain GIS data for 911 as well. The county 911, we deal with anything with making sure we have address points, streets, fire districts, police, all the ESN data, hydrants, and much, much more that can go into a computer-aided dispatch system. So that's our responsibility as well, to work with the 911 team to make sure things are right. We've also implemented web-based solutions. I'll talk about our GIS Portal a little bit, and then how we use that along with application development to kind of go beyond traditional desktop or enterprise solutions, which many or most of you are probably involved with as well. And then going to talk about, well, what we do is we've developed and implement, and at times we help contribute to various applications. We do that to support both county and local government agencies, and that could involve anything from emergency management to 911, planning, assessing. We've been involved in many other agencies, and sometimes we're just passing, whether it be raw data, sometimes map services, and so forth. Sometimes we're developing tools or widgets, or a complete application. And then we, as I said, we play a major or an active role in our emergency planning efforts in the county, not only for drills, but also certainly emergencies. This is kind of us, how we interact with some of the key departments within county governments. So this diagram shows how we interact with them internally. As all you can see, GIS is the center of our universe, and I think that's kind of the way it's supposed to be, right? And unfortunately, when I go home, that's not the way it is. But here's how we interact with some of the outside agencies. Certainly, we deal with all, local governments, the federal government, state government, our emergency responders in the county, and our utilities companies. I'm going to be hitting a lot on that, and that's kind of where some of our success has gone. For our department, or our division within the planning department, we had it started off as just myself about 20 years ago, and then we grew to 7 people. We are down to 4 as a result of, similar to probably everybody else, we're all struggling with resources, and so we try to manage best we can with those with the 4 of us. Access to our geospatial data. In 2010, at the end of 2010, we developed and launched our Rockland County GIS Portal, which serves as our gateway to all geospatial information. We have thousands of maps on the site where we try to, because of our role with tax mapping and a lot of other functions, we're able to push a lot of that to that. So now we use that as like an archive as well for tax mapping. We've got 4 years, soon to be 5, and then we're going to go backwards and start adding to that. So we also push a lot of our GIS data. Some of it is publicly accessible. Others, you have to get an account with us to be able to access. And then we do the same actually with some of our map applications. Some are publicly accessible, and some of them are password protected. Some of those applications include a generic base map application for the general public. We have an internal version for more engineers, surveyors, and others as well. Then we have the emergency application, the emergency map application for emergency preparedness and response. That's where I'm going to focus today, because our road closure tool that we developed is out of that application. And then we have a municipal map application that's used by municipalities and planners, building inspectors, assessors, and so forth for various aspects. And then we've done several applications regarding flood information. To get to our site, it's simply going to rocklandgov.com. We're fortunate they still keep an icon and a link, direct link right off the front page in the lower left, as you see. And then here's our portal. I'm just going to give you slide shots today instead of trying to do anything interactive. Sometimes being in technology, we realize that sometimes we struggle with technology, so I didn't want to have any hiccups or anything. But you can see there a tab for maps, data, interactive maps, and I'm going to be focusing on the interactive maps portion. So our role in the Emergency Operations Center has really evolved over the years. Initially, we were just making maps if we were called into a drill, for instance. We kind of invited our way in once we were there, how we could probably help. And we really took a leadership role in making suggestions all along the way, going back for many years. So we've gone from map making to creating applications and tools for others to use. We create GIS data, maps now. We do analysis right as we're sitting there. And they have it set up so that we're centrally located within the operations center, and we project up onto the screen so everybody can see, and then we can kind of walk people through and answer a lot of questions in that fashion. We've done many times, like we monitor during drills or something. We'll monitor areas to be evacuated or sirens that have failed. And then most recently, through Sandy, for instance, we were monitoring road closures or obstructions, and we were displaying that information up on the screen as well. We've developed and implemented a Flex-based application, so we'll touch on Flex a little bit, known as the GIS Emergency Application, which really serves as our common operational picture. We have the ability to add and monitor road obstructions now from a variety of sources all at one time, since we're going through the web. Users can remote access in, so we'll talk a little bit about who all played during Sandy and how we're going into the future. And the beauty of it is it's accessible over the web, so you don't have to be on the county's infrastructure to be able to access it. In the past, that's what we had to do, and that was always problematic. Just some general observations pertaining to spatial information as we sit in the EOC. Throughout the years, it was a very traditional approach. We, like anybody who sat in the EOC, find inefficiencies. We were challenged by the fact it was very reactive, and we knew we had tools that we could really help with. We knew there was a need for improved communications across agencies and to the public. Across agencies, of the people that are in the room, but also to other agencies within Rockland County itself, and then also going upwards, up the chain as well. There was no common operational picture not that long ago, no application to really do this, and we'll talk about that. We would be delayed in receiving spatial information, for instance, and there was no simple solution. It would go to many different sources. It would come in many different mechanisms as well, sometimes fax, sometimes email, sometimes phone, and it would go to different people, and we would have, if we poked around enough, we found out who was getting it. So we got very involved as a result of that. But certainly the information, as we know, wasn't real time. It wasn't even close to being real time. And then it was often inaccurate. For instance, we get the fact that a dam broke, and it was in the vicinity of a very large dam, and somebody was referencing a very small dam very nearby. So there was, certainly a great deal of potential panic that would have been avoided if we had a spatial tool at that point. That came in via an email, for instance, or fax at that point. So that was just one example. Oftentimes what was happening is we'd get a report of a road being obstructed, and it was very misleading information, very incomplete. It would come in from the field, being relayed through a dispatch, for instance, and the dispatcher would send us information and basically would say, yeah, the church on, County Route 80, and maybe there's 5 churches. And so it was very vague and very incomplete. There was certainly a very limited visual component. I mean, initially we were able to pop our maps up on the screen, or running right from ArcMap or something, or one of the Esri desktop products, but we had no application to really simplify our goal and our mission. And we had very limited analytical abilities during the event because we were just spending all of our time trying to collect the data instead of being able to analyze it or push it on to others and summarize it. Certainly a lack of information. We would often get calls from elected officials, whether it be at the county level or county executive's office, or legislators, or sometimes supervisors or mayors. And they knew at that point maybe that we did the maps, so they just assumed that we'd be able to create all this stuff on the fly. The ironic thing is I got during Irene, I got an inquiry from the utility company asking where all the roads were closed, and we're like, you guys are in the field. And so there's a lot of communication issues, especially earlier on, as there always is. So then the lack of documentation for any event, for funding reimbursement. Certainly as an event goes on, it's important to be able to document everything as you go along the way, so you don't have to go backwards, especially to prove funding reimbursement. So if you can do it and collect your information along the way as well and have a mechanism in place, it definitely helps us now, help you if you're not doing that. It really simplifies things. And then obstacles in getting the information to the public, and talk in a minute how we were able to what we were able to do, at least during Sandy. Just some specific lessons that we learned from previous storms prior to Sandy. For instance, Irene and the 2011 snowstorm that impacted us. A very heavy snowstorm in October of that year. The leaves are still all on the trees down here, and in many ways that impacted the power lines much worse than we had in other major events as well. So, but communications and flow of data, we all agreed had to improve. At this point, we still had a desktop solution that we were using quite regularly, but we did not have any way of monitoring road obstructions. So it was during, as a result of that, I really started jumping on the soapbox and trying to yell and scream from the mountaintops, basically to say, how we need to really record, and set up a mechanism for collecting road obstruction data. We need to be specific in that information because it comes into play as far as response and field crews. Who goes where? It depends on what the obstruction is. So what we learned through some of the events is we needed to know where wires were, down poles, trees, maybe both, between wires or poles and trees, flooding issues, etc. So we had to we learned that we really need to obtain the data as close as possible to the source. Now keep in mind, it's a flex-based tool. It's browser-based. At this point where we're trying to get into, no mobile, so all we learned is, it was very important to try to get as close as we can to the field to collect that data so that you're not playing the phone game and the data starts changing as it goes through people's hands and so forth. Highway departments, DPWs, police and dispatch are all taking the information. We need to standardize data collection wherever possible. It was important to get updates, regular updates, and as obstructions get removed, and record that information. That all becomes very valuable. We wanted to be able to share that information, not only internally within our own emergency operations center, but with the utility company, and obviously talk back and forth. We wanted to be able to share that with whether it be federal or state agencies, law enforcement, fire districts, etc. And we want to be able to, on the fly, create some maps pretty quickly and/or reports. That became, a very key lesson that we learned, that we need to be able to do that. And then so that we need to be able to make decisions on routing, debris removal, movement of people, just to be able to send the transportation people out into the field and know how to navigate to get to that destination to pick up people, whether it be a flooding event or something, and then relocating them to a shelter. We knew we needed to collect data useful for FEMA for, as I said, funding reimbursement, etc. And then summarize the information, and we got to get it to the public, because after a lengthy event, the public starts to find out what some of the numbers are in the EOC, and now they start calling the EOC directly, for instance. We encountered that quite a bit. And then that's taking up the phone or the phones from other people that we should be speaking with as well. So here's a previous road obstruction, what I call communication diagram. It's basically a free-for-all. It's coming in from all different directions, from the residents, from the emergency responders, highway departments, elected officials, emergency managers, and our utility companies, and many more. So we would just get barraged, and when I asked questions, for instance, who's responsible for this, there was never an answer. And we have a county highway department, and they responded, for instance, well, we're responsible for county roads, and that's it. And we can't possibly manage what's going on with all the local roads. Meanwhile, at that time, they really weren't in a position to be able to map where they were located spatially. It was all just tabular then. So in 2011, we launched our first version of our emergency application, which we developed in-house using Esri's ArcGIS server and Adobe Flex. We password protected it so that those we wanted to give access to, which is again controlled through our GIS portal, that they would gain access to it and others would not. We provided access to all pertinent GIS pertaining to emergencies. So it was really a resource where we have map services, for instance, whether it just be parcels or geocoding or Indian Point and dealing with that. And a lot, sorted by, all our data was kind of sorted by various map services going into this. And we used during drills and events. And as we progressed, then come 2012, we released version 2.0. We hired a vendor. We knew we couldn't do everything in-house with one programmer on staff and trying to develop all these applications. So we decided to outsource to add additional security to the system and also a tool that handles road obstructions. So we contracted out with Sewell, going through the RFP process and to assist in that design. And we launched, as we were getting to, we were in final testing stages, all of a sudden we found ourselves getting warnings or finding out that a hurricane might be approaching. The decision was reached that the beta version for that product was far superior to anything we had manually or in any other fashion, or collecting it and trying to put it into a desktop version. So we decided to implement it. Before we did that, so we know what tools and what functionality that tool would need to have, we actually held stakeholder meetings to have overall discussions on what we needed to accomplish with that tool. And so we included other people early on in that development. We included various stakeholders from throughout the county, whether it be local law enforcement, county people, from all different agencies and so forth. But when it came down to Sandy, not everybody played, not everybody was ready. We could only do an abridged version of training. So our county highway department, they actually monitored all their county roads and input the data for that. Two of our 5 towns, through the combination of police department dispatch and or highway departments, entered theirs. So we got 40% of the county, so covered with that. And then the gas and electric company, Orange and Rockland, couldn't enter data, but they used the reporting side of it to help compare to their data. And then New York State DOT sat behind us in the Emergency Operations Center, and I was working with them regularly to decipher exactly where those obstructions were along state DOT roads so that we could enter it right from the EOC and kind of help come up with a solution. So in the months that on the timeline, we ended up releasing a next version 2.1 in 2013 after Sandy had cleared. We had to address some minor bug fixes, and we incorporated Pictometry, and then we also used our map services and started pushing into disaster land. So we were able to enhance some things after that. Just some application details. We had data, we did data input for road obstructions. It's entered spatially using the map and not tabularly, so you're going to see that. Again, I'm not doing live demo, but I'm doing some screenshots. That's very key because that saves a tremendous amount of time. Basically, I can enter a road obstruction in about 15 to 30 seconds and move on to the next item. The advantage of the way that we tackled this technically was you can eliminate spelling errors right away. And then that gives you the ability to do sorts later on by pulling in attribute data that already exists without having to re-enter it. So we performed this by adding a symbol on the map, and we put it over a street center line, and then we're grabbing the attribute data from that center line and building a new record for that obstruction point. So, and I'll show you some of those samples in a minute. Then we're collecting user information automatically. It's being entered based on the login for somebody who's logged into the portal. And to get when you have an account with us, for instance, you have to give us a name, your title, what organization you're with, and contact information. So it's merely just grabbing all that and building the database with that as you do an entry as well. So a lot of this becomes automated. It does a time and date stamp automatically, and there's authentication and accountability because you're collecting that information. You know who the user is. You know it's not a member of the general public, for instance, who's entering the data, and you don't know what's going on. So these are people who now have certainly been trained and understand the system. The other thing is you can get individual road obstruction reports, and we can export it in the database for the road obstructions in either a CSV format, a shapefile, a GDB, geodatabase, or a KML format. So we have a lot of capabilities there. And then finally, some of the technical specifications. We're using ArcGIS Flex API. And I'm just going to summarize some of these, but then we're also using the template picker and component along with the feature template and then the attribute inspector component. So these are kind of the technical aspects that my programmer along with our vendor at that point, Sewell, for the tool, this is what they've gone through. So and what they've used accordingly. So remember earlier in a slide I showed you that to gain access to this you would have to go through interactive maps, that tab up the top. If you don't have an account, you're not going to see this emergency application, for instance. And there's some of our other applications. We give a little narrative along with a little thumbnail. So for instance, if I was in the system, I would click the emergency application, I'd get logged in, and it's just a simple, straightforward Flex product. Across the top, notice a couple of the icons. I'm going to capture a few of those, and then I just opened up the map layers to show you. If you focus down near the bottom, there's going to be a road closures map layer. Or folder really, with then two layers. One is the road obstructions, and then the other one is the historical. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but basically what's happening is that when you clear an obstruction, it then gets ported over and gets pushed over into the historical layer, so that way you don't lose the information. So we've always got a record. This way you can turn on and display just the active road obstructions versus the historical, and something that's already been cleared. So let's say we wanted to be able to put an obstruction on the map. We would just do a simple search by an address. You would zoom into that location. And then what I would do is I would click the hammer tool near the top for adding a road obstruction. And once you do that, a few things happen. You get a window that shows you the possibilities of the type of obstruction in which you would choose from. You would also get a crosshair that says click to add a point, and you'll see that in the center of the map there, hopefully. And then if you notice that between the previous slide, if I can go back here, you see just the right-of-ways for the streets. Now you see the center lines displayed. So if you're zoomed in far enough, and once you activate that hammer tool, which is the road obstruction tool, then it will display the center line information. And then you'll know whether you're on a center line because as you navigate or move the cursor or the mouse away from a center line, it will indicate basically that you're not there. You'll be able to interpret you're not there. And so if you were to enter a point not on a center line, it's not going to be able to grab any attribute data from that street. So this way, you know, if you clicked it on here, you would end up with that information. In the result, you would get the location. It would look something like this for that particular road obstruction. And depending upon the type of obstruction, you will have different symbols. So that symbol is wires down, for instance, and is actually highlighted right now because I've opened up the road, I've actually gone back and opened up the road obstruction tool, or the road closure tool, and so it's actually highlighted. So you get different symbols depending upon the type of obstruction, and that window you'll also see, now that I have that same tool open, one of the options down below is editing and another is clearing, or I could actually go through to print. So I'm going to continue to move on here. So if I wanted to edit a obstruction, I'd be able to click on that obstruction itself. Up would pop an update window, and I would be able to change some of the information. By default, we had some data that was all pre-canned. For instance, we set it up so that the road status is either obstructed, partially obstructed, or clear. And then we assign different priorities. We're still coming up with how to classify that. We're working with the local utility company on how to do that. And then we had a few windows available for just typing as far as the priority, what the reasoning is for maybe if I said that it was a high priority, then I could type in that information. And then there's other windows for updates. Near the top, you'll actually see the calendar, for instance, with the time date stamp. And then where it says reported by, that would be, remember, we know who's entering the information because their account's been enabled and they're logged in. But this is, say, if Mrs. Smith entered it, or maybe the dispatcher got a call from Sergeant McCormick, for instance, and the dispatcher was told, by Sergeant McCormick, there's an issue here. Then they would type that in, and then we can go back, and if we have questions, we can go get some clarification. Here I'm just displaying it over. We brought in a widget for Google Street View, and if we wanted to be able to do that as well. And then just displaying it over aerials. Here's a slide on an individual road obstruction report. And so the road that's highlighted in yellow is the existing road. So this is, if you recall, one of the tabs that I had I could print. And that's really what I'm doing here, is I'm printing a report with the map and the tabular information, highlighting the actual obstruction in yellow, and then the tabular information that's assigned to that point is on the right side. So let's go through that a little bit. It says the hazard type, in this case is a pole transformer. It tells you what road it's on, tells you if there's an alternate name of the road, and it tells me the road type. In this case, it's a county highway, what town it's in, what village it's in, and then along with other information that is either automatically stamped or based on the data that we just put in from that previous window. What's key about that is that all that data up top, the hazard type, that's by the pull-down menu, selecting of what the issue is for the obstruction, but it's grabbing the attribute data from the street centerline file. So it's grabbing the road type, the alternate name, or the road name, and the road type, the town, and the village automatically. That becomes very valuable for me to sort out during an event. For instance, I could go right to the town of Clarkstown and I could pull out all the local roads, for instance, and go back, quick send them a report and say, here's what I have for a summary report. You confirm, or we need clarification on some things. I see a question up, able to use a GPS receiver with this application to know real-time location. No, we haven't incorporated anything like that. Again, this is flex-based. I'll talk in a minute about where we're headed to address more field collection. Here's just some tabular data. This is imagine this being the left side of the spreadsheet, for instance, of some of those fields you just saw in that window previously. And here's the right side. So you see it sees based on who is entering the data. I'll go backwards. You'll see on the right side it says C first name and C last name. That's the person that entered the information. And then, so that's based on the portal entry when they logged in and what organization they're with and so forth. So we can grab all that, and I could have phone number, contact email address, whatever, also added to this report.
Doug,
Yep.
I did see that there was a post in here. I think there's a couple here, but one question was, are you able to use a GPS receiver with this application to know real-time location?
Yeah, the answer on that is at this point, no. We haven't been able to do anything as far as collecting the data or incorporating any mechanism yet, at least for here, for what I'm showing today, with being out in the field as of yet. And then I'm just displaying with Pictometry. We've pulled in the Pictometry widget as well. We've worked with them. and then just bring it into Google Earth. Here I'm displaying a clustering technique. So if I'm zoomed out at the full page level, I can see it, instead of what we learned during the event is that the whole screen was red. Everything, because we had between 500 and 600 obstructions countywide at any one time at its peak. My hair there on the right would not look like that during the event. That's certainly a controlled environment because it was crazy. But we came back and we developed this clustering technique, or deployed clustering technique, so you can see, if you're zoomed out, that all right, there's 5 obstructions in this particular area. It's not till you zoom in do they kind of automatically explode into the individual ones, and you'll see different types of obstructions as well there. This is just a dump, just exported it into ArcMap, and then just very simply, we're able to create it, classify it by road type or jurisdiction, what were state roads. You'll see that in the legend, what were county roads in yellow, and then the local streets, and so we're able to do that. The individual line work that was done separately by us, so you see closed and restricted roads, and we can actually go in only ourselves, the GIS team, and actually put that into the application when we're live during an event. We can actually do line segments in addition to points, but only we can do that. So kind of our present or future road obstruction now gets simplified down to something like this. You'll see four of these are highlighted in yellow: the utility company, the highway department, emergency responders, and emergency managers. Those people, in addition to my team, are entering the data. The others are the ones that can benefit from it. Because I'll tell you, I sat in the EOC during Sandy, and it got to the point where the school superintendents were calling me somehow. A New York City newspaper was calling me. I don't know how that got out, but it was just, they started calling us directly, so and bypassing other sources. So that was challenging in itself. So we allow those 4 in yellow to be able to enter the data. The others could certainly benefit from its results. So we're going to set up something that, or one of our next phases, that some people only get to view it. All right, so just some strengths to kind of wrap some of this up is we launched it prior to the storm. It was completely advantageous. It definitely was far superior to what we had off a desktop product. We were able to track and monitor the obstructions. We were able to do it for probably about half of the county, which saved us tremendously and allowed my team to be able to do some analytical aspects. We had the ability to recommend routes for moving equipment, large equipment, as a result of that, and personnel, transportation resources, emergency vehicles, because we were able to at least monitor major infrastructure, county roads, state roads, for instance, and then several of the town, even local roads. We were able to forward this information. We were forwarding it up to the state, MTA, New Jersey Transit, Red Cross, our local EMS, because they were asking for the information. Then we would dump the data and link it off of and bring it into Google Maps tool, and then link it off our county website. And the local newspaper picked up on it, and within about, I think it was 6 days, we had almost 10,000 hits for residents. We summarized it. We basically just dumped the major for county and state roads to at least give people an idea where the major infrastructure had obstructions, and to try to help them out. We didn't tell them that it was wires down or poles down. We just simplified it just to give them that information. Weaknesses, we still need to, I'm just going to touch on a few of these. We need to keep working with our local utility company. They weren't fully involved as far as updating the information. The other agencies were. They need to be in order for us to really work. And you can see the power of the system is not just dealing with highway departments. We need that connectivity to the utility companies. That is such a huge part to this whole aspect of what's real. They have boots on the ground as well as the highway departments. So we found some additional layers, and we didn't have a mobile solution. We knew we didn't have it. We know we need to go there, and that's where we're starting to head. So here's some steps that we've done since we officially launched it. Add some new tools that I covered. We've incorporated it into Disasterland. So now we push our map services, our base map services, along with our road obstruction map services, right into Disasterland. So anybody sitting in our Emergency Operations Center can also view that. They don't have the power to enter it through DLAN, but they have the ability to view it at least. We've done training for all highway departments, DPWs, Orange and Rockland. We're going to repeat again this summer. And we're working on standardizing data collection and procedures. We've come up with a lot of things. We eventually want to be able to grab the photo. If somebody's in the field, just take a picture, boom, through a mobile solution, grab the photo, grab the pole, see the pole ID, whatever we got to do, be able to add that as well. And then more integration with the utility companies. Right now, our gas and electric company is actually working with our data in our outage management system to see how that will work and how that will play. And then we're in development of mobile application to improve data collection, but certainly it'll pay dividends on the quality by getting the data collected right at the street level. We're working on some procedures there. We'll grab the photo along with its location. Development costs, we anticipated a certain amount going into this. Some of this was in-house, some of this was for stakeholders and so forth. We outsourced a certain amount, and then that's our cost of under $50,000. We calculated a measurable return on investment, or ROI. If you look at the roads we covered, just county designated roads represents about 15%. For instance, nearly 100 of the 500 total road obstructions were on county designated roads. So we estimated in working with our highway department that we were able to clear roads 30 to 40% faster along these roads by deploying this tool. Wait times and delays were reduced due to improved communication. So imagine if we had this in the field, what we could have done and what we could have accomplished. It would have been amazing. The costs, we actually worked with our highway departments to calculate at the county level a cost per field crew and what it cost for the additional days that they estimated it would have taken without the tool. You see $105,000 total savings. Again, I'm only assessing county designated roads. If we calculate roughly 5 times that to cover all roads within county government or within the Rockland County geographic area itself, we estimate that it would have really been closer to 5 times that value in savings. Some additional costs, well, certainly you got to look at inefficiency, lack of a coordinated effort due to incomplete information at the EOC impacts response and decision making. Law enforcement was staged at traffic signals because of for making it a safer intersection. We have plans for all that due to the traffic lights being out. So imagine if things were prioritized and everybody got to see it and was looking at a system like this, which we really look at as a communication tool, we could save on costs there. Closures, certainly it impacts everything, as we know, schools, businesses. And then there's delays, tree removal, travel delays for commuters as a result every day that things go by. The benefits to the tool, I think, were pretty clear. We get closer to a real time. It's much more, and I can't state this enough, we sell it as a communication mechanism or vehicle. It's much more efficient communication for us than anything else we've been able to deploy up to this point. So you get reporting, you can export, you can sort. The advantages working with FEMA and for documentation, etc., go without saying. And then just kind of some future improvements to wrap some things up here. We're recoding our emergency application and a road obstruction tool. The intent is retool everything into HTML5 and ArcGIS JavaScript API. That enables us now to get to tablets, smartphones, and not just be limited to Android versus Apple. So then we can get more of a real-world mapping data and information development and monitoring situation. We're looking at, say, crowdsourcing social media opportunities for collection of data, but you got to be careful because we want this particular application itself is based on almost, you really want authenticated or verified sources. But we're looking at what ways we can maybe either monitor social media, to maybe add to our system in some capacity. And implementing a system that's really used every day. That's where the value will hopefully be. So that throughout the summer, for instance, and the highway department's doing pavement projects, boom, they're using it. And then transportation sees it for public transportation purposes, and also 911 would be able to monitor it. So that, for accidents or fire or anything else where there might be an issue, where there might be roads closed, traffic flow, we want to be able to use it. If it's used every day, you don't have to constantly train people every season, for instance. Or as we now get to these rainstorms, for instance, in the spring and summer as well, it's all kind of blending together. Kind of wrapping up, the GIS community, I feel, really has to continue to do a better job at educating emergency management professionals, as well as the GIS community, I feel, has to also do a better job at becoming educated in emergency management. So on both sides, both or all three really, the EOC interaction as things take place, poking around where we can get involved and how we can help. And then knowing all about incident command or getting some training on incident command system as well as NIMS. Those are all very key. We've taken some trainings. We're going to continue to get more training as well. And then we market our application as a communication tool. Some people have heard GIS for a long time, and that's great. And some people, I feel it falls on deaf ears after a while. So we keep pushing on this as a communication tool. Try to focus on becoming more customer-oriented, helping to solve the problem. Sometimes we get lost by the fact that, okay, we can make these nice maps, or let's go in and do all this cool analytical efforts. But we also have to help to solve the problems, and we saw this as a direct issue in our EOC, and nobody else was stepping up, and we had to take the ball with it. We knew we could solve that, or at least make it a lot more efficient. I don't know if we'll ever solve it. And I'm trying to think, as we all become leaner as far as staffing and money, just keep looking at ourselves almost like the private sector, where we have to keep improving efficiencies and marketing our capabilities. Keep getting the message out there that we can help solve a lot of these problems or contribute to them. And that's it. I'm sorry for being so long-winded. I hope you found that entertaining or learned some things. Certainly take some time to answer some questions. If I don't know the answers, I'll be happy to get back to you on those.
Doug, well, I see some are typing right now, but I did see one. I don't know if you already answered it earlier or not, but that was Phil had a question of number of GIS staff, I imagine, for your organization.
Yep. I mentioned it earlier. Started off as myself. We were able to grow up to about 7 people within my division, and now we're back down to about 4. So that's where we're at right now.
And I see Al posted here. He was just wondering if you'd share the application with other counties.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anything we can do, as we move forward, as we know, these events don't cross, they cross county line, municipal boundaries. So anything we can do to help keep pushing this. And whether this is the final solution, who knows? But we just wanted to kind of have a proof of concept at a minimum that we could really help and make a contribution, and I feel that we've really been able to accomplish that, so I was happy.
I'm just checking. Looks like we have some others maybe potentially sending some stuff in here. Oh yeah, a lot of people typing now.
By one, thanks, Michael and Al, for comments. I'll make sure to share that with the team here. It was a lot of work. Like I said, it wasn't all done internally. Right now, just so you know, we're actually we're creating an Indian Point application That's our first one, a full rewrite in HTML5 and JavaScript. We've actually contracted out for that, working with Wendell, and so that's going to kind of serve as our new framework, our new setup, where we're going to be able to start dealing with mobile solutions and start going into the field and doing things, and that's really where we obviously need to go.
And I see that Michael Naughton had a question about how difficult will the transition to HTML5 be for you?
Wow, that's a great question, Michael. Well, that's actually why we're outsourcing that part. It's a little more complicated for us. We've broken out, for instance, the map service for the road closure portion, not to enter the data, but just to be able to view it. We've broken that out and retooled that, and we've done it with certain aspects, but we haven't done the overall solution, even going to the initial base map. So I'm looking forward to this project that we're working on with Wendell to be able to do that, which will give us some of what we need as a framework. Yeah, we often forget, I see the ROI comment, we often forget about really doing that. I've had the role here of also being acting commissioner for planning and public transportation in the past, and believe me, that was an education on trying to assign value to your efforts, and that becomes such a key aspect to this. So, to really help justify getting additional funds, etc.
Okay, we're getting lots of questions now, company. I don't know if you can see in the chat there.
Al's question, for instance, about Steve's presentation last Friday. I was down there. I took one of my local police department emergency managers who's actually been very involved, one of the towns that participated in, and we both found that very, very, very helpful, because what Steve was talking about was about allocating resources and so forth. And that's one of the, and I didn't touch on it, but that was one of the weaknesses of what we have so far. It's capturing road obstructions, but boy, if we could also have another tool that has the resources, that would really give a much more complete solution, like where personnel are stationed, where sandbags are, for instance, in a flooding event, where emergency vehicles are. That will be very key. So we're going to certainly reach out and look and start poking into that as well. And Steve's presentation was very valuable for that aspect. Michael's comment: would you share your presentation with us so we could share with others? Absolutely. It's a large file. I'll figure out a way to be able to do that if Mickey doesn't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I do actually have an answer. Doug, we got your file, your PowerPoint that you gave us here to upload for the presentation. So if you don't mind, we can actually probably put that up on the GIS Association website there.
Absolutely,
and
that's fine.
Also, this whole session was recorded, so we will that'll be made available too, also through the YouTube channel for the New York State GIS Association. Also,
Phil has a question. How many of the audience have? And I see it's kind of cut off. Have EOC applications to help communicate, something to that effect?
How many of the audience have EOC apps to help communicate? I see Michael has responded here. But otherwise, I guess, are there any other questions from anybody else? I'll here for a minute. Otherwise, we'll get ready to wrap things up.
I hope you found it informative, and yeah, absolutely share that. I'm happy to contribute in any way to keep moving things forward, and I hope it. The key aspect is not just putting a dot on the map, or doing a tabular. Some of our local towns, just I see a question coming in, they were entering stuff through Google Documents, and they thought that was a great way to be able to share, but there was no mapping component with that. What we found when we analyzed their file is that they had like 10 different entries from 10 dispatchers about the same road obstruction. So it was, and they couldn't do anything as far as sorting, and because they were typing a road in, Main Street or Maple might be spelled 10 different ways, or they had the wrong jurisdiction. By us stamping that information in the attribute data to the Schuetz centerline file, it saved us for all that to be able to sort. We're going to add fire district and maybe school district as well. So we'll be adding that down the line to help simplify things.
Yeah, and I see here Al mentioned that, you know, the GIS, New York State GIS Association will be forming professional affiliation groups in transportation and emergency management. He said more will be coming soon on that. So that'll be something to watch for. And I'm going to leave this session open for a little bit. So while everybody kind of, as we start wrapping up, I believe there'll be like a quick little survey to be taken as you exit from this. So I'm going to leave this session up and running so we can gather that information. And I'll close it out here in a few minutes. And with that, thank you, Doug, very much. I found that presentation very informative and helpful. And I hope that everybody else enjoyed it. And thank you again. And this was a webinar that was put on by the New York State GIS Association. And hopefully everybody enjoyed it. And we're always looking for ideas. So if you have ideas, you can contact myself or any of the professional development committee members. But my name is Mickey Dietrich. I'm over at Tug Hill Commission. My information should be up on the GIS Association website there. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you again, Doug, for presenting.
Absolutely, and I thank you as well. I'll stay on a couple of minutes. I see a couple of questions coming in, so I'll continue to watch that. And but I thank you very much for the opportunity and for the positive comments and all the questions. So, and thank you for, I know your time's valuable, but for stopping in today.